Welcome to MT Mentor, where we fill our cups and share our wisdom. I am your host, Jennifer Hicks, and I am a board-certified music therapist and licensed educator with over 20 years of experience as a clinician, educator, supervisor, and mentor. You can learn more about me and our MT Mentor podcast and membership group on my website at www.joyfulnoisesllc.com. You can click on the link at the bottom of the homepage to receive a free infographic and periodic updates, including previews of upcoming podcast guests and episodes. It is an honor to welcome our guest mentor for our very first episode today, Emma Moonier. Emma, welcome. Emma is a registered attachment therapist, a licensed professional clinical counselor, and a board-certified music therapist. She is a professor of music therapy at Augsburg University and a music psychotherapist, specializing in attachment and attachment injury. Emma also works extensively with queer and trans youth. For full disclosure, Emma has been my professor and supervisor, as well as a valued colleague and friend over the years, and I am so excited that she has agreed to join us for this conversation. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. It's so good to hear all those things.
Absolutely. I think we all need that now and then, of someone to just remind us of who, well, and not even who we are, because we're getting a little deeper into that piece too, but some of the many things that we've done and many facets of who we are.
Absolutely.
So why don't we start there and just tell us a little bit about your music therapy side of who you are, your music therapy journey and the work that you do now.
So my first degree was in performance, as has a tendency to happen in this field sometimes. And I was really studying accompanying, or what they now call collaborative piano, which I like a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was doing that, and I was working professionally and continuing to study, I got a job just for fun, working in a school system with a segment of kids that didn't usually get musical programming because they had special needs.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was that I was rushing to get away from the job that I thought I had wanted all along, get to the job that I had taken just for fun. And in preparing for that work, a lot of the research that I was doing was in music therapy, which I hadn't realized was even a field when I went into my undergraduate work. So I ended up getting an equivalency, a bachelor's equivalency degree in music therapy from the University of Minnesota, once I sort of got into all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my work has been in mental health, although I've had some pockets here and there where I've worked in other places, but the bulk of my work has been either within private practice, within psychiatric hospital settings, or within corrections. And I would say I have a great passion for that work. After working for one particular psychiatric hospital for a lot of years, I decided to go back and get a little bit more training in terms of the verbal interactions that we were having, and being able to look at diagnoses and all of the intersections that happen between the musical side of things and the mental health side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so went back and got a master's in clinical counseling. And since then, I've done a fellowship in attachment therapy, which was just a specialty that I came along the way. So at this point, I'm mostly working at Augsburg University. I'm teaching there, and I coordinate all of the clinical practicums and do that piece of the work. But then I also have a private practice. And so I do about 12 hours a week of clinical work. And some of that is groups with what I would call gender-expansive youth. So generally that's transgender, gender nonconforming, non-binary folks that are interested in exploring some questions around gender and how that affects the rest of life through music.
Yes.
And I do a lot of work with kids and families that are involved in foster care and adoption systems.
Mm-hmm.
So those are sort of the two sides of my expertise there.
And both of those areas, as someone who has also worked a lot in mental health, have been areas that I know I've sought you out in the past with questions and just hoping to learn more. And I'm excited that we'll be able to share some of that wisdom that you have with those listening today. Let's start with attachment. What would you like those of us music therapy professionals and students who are less familiar with attachment and attachment injury to know?
So one of the reasons I love the idea of attachment within therapeutic settings is that everybody has an attachment story. And it doesn't matter what your skill levels are in other parts of your being, what your developmental level is, where you are culturally, where you are spiritually. All of us have attachments to other human beings. And a lot of what happens within our stories happens within those attachments. And I just find that a really beautiful place to sort of explore and see what's going on. Also, I think a lot of what sort of holds us up within our own journeys are the pieces of attachment that sometimes we're not totally even aware of in our conscious space. Things that are sort of implanted as part of our experience that we understand as how everyone is, or how human relationship works, or all of those kinds of things. And there is a lot of growth possible within that space with all of the clients that we work with. So I love that. A lot of what we're looking at when I'm working with kids within the foster system and adults who grew up within the foster system are folks that have had interrupted attachments all along the life cycle. Right. So they've had lots and lots of situations with various types of traumas involved in each. And many of those folks experience trauma not only with the break of one relationship, when, for example, a child is removed from a home, but also with entrance into a new family system. And negotiating all of the cultural differences that are there, negotiating all of the differences in communication styles and parenting styles and culture of the home, with recognizing who is trustworthy and who is worthy of doing the work to find ways of having sort of permanence in our attachments and all of those things. And what we find is that folks that don't have the opportunity to really center attention on those topics can have lots of struggles in lots of areas of life. And so one of the things that draws me to it is that it is something that not only affects everybody, but also has great potential within it for change and for growth and for exploration for the clients and for me as the therapist in that therapeutic relationship.
And as you talk, I'm curious about how those experiences with attachment for both the client and therapist affect that therapeutic relationship.
Oh, I think it's huge. I think that therapeutic relationship is incredibly primary within attachment therapy. It is in all therapies, music therapy or otherwise, but especially so in attachment therapy, because we're asking the client to enter into this journey with us, to trust us in a space where what we're really looking at is folks that have had lots of experiences where they haven't trusted. Either adults in their lives, white people in their lives, mental health practitioners in their lives, representatives of the system in their lives. There have been lots of reasons for folks not to trust. And so I'm showing up as a music therapist and saying, hey, maybe we should find some ways for you to find folks that can trust. And that feels incredibly scary. And so negotiating that fear and being with the client within that fear is a huge piece of what actually therapeutically necessary for that, for the therapeutic process to even get off the ground.
Yeah. Thank you, Emma. As you talk about that, I'm hearing lots of connections with the work that I've done with adults with a multitude of diverse identities, including LGBTQAI+ adults. And I've been very inspired by the work that you do with gender-expansive youth. What would you like the students and professionals listening to know about that work and to maybe carry with them as they work with youth and adults who may be gender expansive, LGBTQAI+? What would you like us as a profession to know?
I think, forgive me if this sounds pretty basic, but we're going to start at the beginning.
It's the very best place to start.
And I think the most important piece to recognize is that all of those letters in LGBTQIA2+ have a cultural identity. And so much of the time, society and individual practitioners within society have a tendency to see these identities as choices, as quirks, as personalities, and not to identify that there is a whole cultural community here with our own history, with our own background, with our own cultural norms that are really important within any kind of conversation. And particularly when we're engaged in mental health care, but also in other parts. I'm so sorry for all of my reminders. So really any clients are going to have this culture with them. And I think when we can sort of shift our focus from how this identity can be difficult, the challenges that it brings to bear, the stereotypes that come with it, and really step into the strength and the character and the love that is involved in the cultures that are represented there, we're taking a great leap forward that I think is really important. And I think often that's what's missing when queer identified people in general and gender expansive folks particularly experience situations where it feels like there is a lack of cultural competence. It's around that issue. It's around the feeling that we are having a disagreement by being parts of different cultural communities, and those kinds of things. So I would say that that's really the most important place to start.
And embracing the complexity and nuance and individuality within each of the cultures. And that applies not only, of course, when we're talking about trans and queer and gender expansive youth, but all of our identities, allowing for that nuance and embracing and getting to know each client.
Absolutely.
And each colleague. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Emma.
Colleague, fantastic point. Yeah. I think also, particularly when we're working with gender expansive folks, but also with queer folks in general, that there are really easy ways to just communicate from the get-go that we are in this with you by using the correct pronouns, by making sure not to misgender people, by using living names and not dead ones, by understanding the language that goes with these identities and sort of what the processes can look like. Now that requires some work to have understanding of all of that, but it is all stuff that is absolutely available on Google. And I have really strong feelings that it's our obligation to do that work before we are in a situation where we have a client that we have a lack of understanding about when it comes to those cultural things.
Absolutely. And Emma, if there are resources that you would like to share, we will be including that in with the transcripts and all that information for the podcast on each of the platforms. So please feel free to share that. I also just listened yesterday to the Perspectives on Perspectives podcast. That
I listened to that too. It was
did
fantastic.
Yes. That Annette and Leah, I believe, did on the work that they'd done in a retrospective of the work that Team Rainbow had done. And it's phenomenal. So I'll include those links as well. And again, in better understanding not only the clients that we serve, but also the colleagues with whom we work and the families with whom we work. And yeah. And all of us as we move forward. And that is an area where I know I have been excited to see the change over the years as we as a profession have been working to intentionally welcome diversity in our field in all of its beautiful facets. And I have seen that happening in the students that I get to supervise, in the lectures that I've done for different classes. These are conversations that we're having, and I think they're really important conversations to be having. You've been a great mentor to me in my work as a supervisor. For those who are listening who are either a supervisor now or would like to be one someday, what would you like them to know about supervising music therapy students? And I know that you do entire presentations on this. So if you haven't heard Emma speak, I highly recommend hearing her presentations on this because I always learn a lot. For now, what would you like to share on that, Emma?
So it's really hard for me to narrow down what are the most important pieces. And of course, I have the benefit of having this as a full-time job. So I have had a lot of time to think about it. But I would say the primary thing that we have to be really aware of when we're working with students is something that we have to be aware of when we're working with clients too, which is that most people are doing their very best with the skills that they have and the resources that they have and the experiences that they have had within life. And so much of what we are doing when we're supervising students in particular is trying to figure out where exactly on the many, many spectrums that we have regarding clinical skills and musical skills and interpersonal skills everybody sits. And we may or may not have visibility into why folks sit in those places, but we need to be able to accept that there are likely reasons.
Yes.
And that is something that I think is a really important piece about how we teach in the university setting in the United States and also within clinical settings, that we don't necessarily need to know sort of the origin of the difficulty in order to understand that there may be a difficulty attention. And sometimes we can say, I'm noticing a difficulty here, and I'm wondering if this is something you might be able to talk with your therapist, with your academic supervisor, with your whoever it feels important to talk to. Um, and sometimes we just need to sort of step into the muck a little
Mm-hmm.
bit and have some difficult conversations and allow ourselves to be a little bit uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes not knowing, and allow lots of opportunities, just like we would with our clients, right? For folks to sort of bloom in their own ways, which
Yes.
I think is really, really important. I also think it's important to recognize that, particularly at the academic level, um, we're in a huge position of mentorship that includes with it an awful lot of power differential.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we have to be really aware of the biases that exist for us individually and for the agencies we work for. And if there are ways to step around those things to ensure good education,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really, really vital. Um, but I also think it's really important that we engage in all of that work ourselves,
Absolutely.
um, even if nothing else, as a model
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yes.
to our students to recognize that we are engaged in the work, and that often implies to practicum students who are new to the field that this is part of responsible practice, because it is, right? So
Absolutely.
having that self-awareness is a
Yeah.
huge piece of it too. Now, the way I'm talking about this makes it sound like every practicum student has major difficulties within the clinical space. And that is not true. We all have had students that come in and you would feel safe with them running a group on the second day that they're present. But that doesn't mean that those students don't have areas of growth for themselves as well. So it's just about meeting everybody exactly where they are
Mm-hmm.
and understanding exactly where we are
Yeah.
as supervisors.
Yeah.
Was that too
And
long-winded?
no, it was wonderful. I wanted to keep shouting, yes, yes. I just think that important piece of recognizing and naming and modeling that we are still learning and we are doing the work and we are continuing to grow in our own self-awareness, in our own, those competencies are always a spectrum for all of us. There is never a point where, yep, got that one, and we're done. We are always learning and growing, and being able to model that, as well as being able to model stepping into those crucial conversations. And creating spaces where we can have those conversations is so important. And knowing when they might need additional support, whether it's a student or a colleague we're talking with, being able to know when they might need additional support too.
Absolutely.
So important. And thank you to you, Emma, and also to all y'all out there who are mentoring and supervising and working with the future of our profession, with our future leaders in healthcare. We're so grateful for that. Who has one of your mentors been, Emma? Who has been someone that has served in that role for you?
So I have a lot of mentors on a lot of spaces, but within music therapy specifically, I was really lucky to have two incredible internship supervisors that still serve as mentors to
Mm-hmm.
me 25 years later, and um, who are now friends. So my two internship supervisors were Bridget Doak
Oh,
and Annie Heiderscheit, who I
oh,
continue to work with
yes.
at Augsburg. And one of the things I have really appreciated about both of those two as mentors was their ability to um, mentor me and encourage me all along, um, in doing things differently than each of them did it in
Mm-hmm.
clinical practice, and being able to go with me on those pathways and listen to those stories and still have suggestions for how those things might work, even when I was sort of on a different clinical path than they were.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And, you know, we all know that music therapy is a big, broad field with a lot of ideas in it. But I think that that has been something that has been a real gift to me as a mentee, is having the flexibility to find myself as a music therapist within that mentorship, and not just to find what my mentors would like from me.
Yeah.
Right?
But to really listen to what resonates with you and what doesn't, and to find your music therapy. Yes. Oh, thank you, Emma. Earlier, you talked about how students often have a why behind their challenges, and we do too as professionals, and we all face them. So how has a challenge that you've faced, or a failure or perceived failure in your life, set you up for later success or taught you something important on your journey?
So when I saw this question on the list, I thought, well, I've got one just about every day.
Yes.
So I thought, instead of talking about sort of a big thing, and trust me, I've got them, that felt like a failure, I talk about sort of moment to moment things that I still am trying to figure out at this point. So one of the things that I have been really paying attention to recently within our field is how I can be totally present and effective at being a white ally. Now, this has been a goal of mine for many, 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 many years.
Yeah.
And I have yet to get to a point where I feel sure of the action steps to getting there. So what I find myself doing is trying and making mistakes all along the way. And just recently, I became aware of the fact that I was probably saying too much, particularly within online forums. And, you know, we've had lots of things happening on Facebook and music in the last couple of weeks. And there have been lots of opportunities to speak loudly and to show how angry I am about those things. And I don't think that's helpful as an ally. I think it's more helpful for me to listen. And recognize that I'm part of the problem that has existed within these spaces for lots and lots and lots of years. So I've been really looking at that in a strong way in the last couple of weeks, and I have had the chance to sort of go back and look at some of my, even just my Facebook posts, and go, oh yeah, I wish I've taken more of a listening stance there. And there's an opportunity there, I think, to do a little bit of a shame dive.
Yeah.
Think, well, I'm just not going to say anything ever. When really the obligation as citizens and as ethical professionals is to do the work to figure out how we can speak in ways that are supportive and speak in ways that show that we are listening and find ways to be skillfully quiet within that space. That's been my recent failure.
I am with you. For all y'all who know me, listening is something I'm always working on, and knowing when to speak, when to advocate, when to listen. It is not a simple question, and also balancing things like, for me, self-care and making sure that that's not coming out as white apathy, and that, you know, finding that balance is challenging. And I do think there is power in listening and amplifying other voices,
Mm-hmm.
and really being present in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
to be mindful of our own responses and the responses around us. Sangeeta Swami and I are doing a CMTE actually at AMTA. So if you're listening to this, it's going to be awesome. And you'll get to listen to this before AMTA. So feel free to check it out, on self-compassion around our biases and areas of privilege. And we've been working with this RAIN practice to recognize our responses, to allow, to investigate internally, and to nurture ourselves in the midst of these challenging days and moments. And so I really appreciate that focus on presence and listening and being mindful and still advocating and finding a way to do all of that. Continues to be one of those habits that I'm trying to build myself. So what new or changed habit or belief for you has most improved your life?
Um,
By the way,
I
she did get all of these questions in advance, so I just don't throw these at the podcast guest.
I think that there are a couple of things that have been really important in my personal journey around how to be effective and kind within therapeutic practice and as a teacher. And I think there have been several lessons along that place that have been important. But I think one of the most important ones is about setting boundaries. And setting boundaries for myself, but also setting boundaries with other people and recognizing other people's boundaries, and being able to fully embrace the boundary setting process, no matter how it sort of works, right? And one of the things that I have found is that within our current, I don't know if it's a societal issue or an educational environment issue or what, but in that space, we have a big need to offer all of the reasons why we need to set a boundary right now. And I am really aware of how important it is, particularly for me, to be able to say, I'm struggling and I need to set a boundary for a little while, and that I don't need to justify it beyond that. And I also don't need to set permanent boundaries today.
Yes.
I only need to set the boundaries that are needed for today. And so that has allowed me to step into sort of a more, I don't know, self-compassionate way of being. And it's also allowed me to engage more in a healthier way, I think, with other people's boundaries, because I'm recognizing them when they come up. I think better than I used to. I hope. So I mean, that's sort of a series of lessons, but they're all around the same topic, right?
Yes.
That I think is really important.
I love that. That's going to resonate in my head for a while. I only need to set the boundaries that I need to set for today. Tomorrow they might change. What are the boundaries we need today? And then honoring that not only in ourselves, but in others, and recognizing that in others too, that they might need a stronger boundary today too. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Emma. I'm going to sit with that one and resonate with that one for a while. Oh, you and I both have bookshelves behind us.
We do.
I love books. Maybe too much. My elementary librarian remembered me when my mom ran into her not too long ago. What are some of the books and some of the music as music therapists that have most influenced your life as a human as well? Not just as a music therapist, but as a human being. What are those books and soundtracks and music that have both been most influential for you?
So, books. I loved that I saw this question on the list because I have a particular author that I would love to talk up, and
Mm-hmm.
that's Alex Ian Toffey, who is a local um, advocate and and mental health practitioner around gender identity issues.
Mm-hmm.
He works for Edge's Wellness Center, which is in South Minneapolis, about 2 blocks from the George Floyd Memorial.
Mm-hmm.
And he has written 4 books, and I love all of them and think that everyone should read them. So I'm just going to plug him for a minute.
Please
So
do. Would you spell his last name for us too?
IANTAFFI.
Thank you. We'll make sure to put some links too. As I mentioned, when we link to resources, we'll link to his books as well. Yeah, continue.
So there are 3 that I use really actively within my client care and often recommend that my clients get a hold of. The first is How to Understand Your Gender, which is a workbook that you can use within group work and those kinds of things. The second is Life Isn't Binary, which I sort of love. And the third
I
one
need that
is
as like a motto somewhere behind me. Say the third one again.
The third one is Hell Yeah, Self-Care.
Ah.
Self-care that's trauma informed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I've used all of those with clients. He's just recently come out with another that's called, and I even wrote it down so I wouldn't get it wrong, Gender Trauma, Healing Cultural, Social, and Historical Gendered Traumas.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one that I read and have been sitting with
Mm-hmm.
for about a year. And just looking at how to modify my own practice with this particular community and the larger communities, because there's an awful lot of gendered trauma that is not transgender or gender expansive specific, right?
Absolutely.
That I've really been sort of working through, and how to incorporate the book specifically and the ideas embodied in it within practice. So those are some books. I'm mindful that you keep asking me questions and I give you 4 or 5 answers. So.
You know me well enough, Emma, to know that I would have at least as many. So please, I'm loving this.
When it comes to music, it's really an interesting question, because there is certainly music that has informed me as a human being, right? And for me, a lot of that has been hip hop of the 80s and 90s, and lots of feminist and lesbian sort of punk and folk music. So that has been what has fed me as a human being.
Yes.
However, what has fed my career, the way I think about my clients, and my sort of worldview are a totally different thing.
Yes.
You know, let's take, for example, a band called Linkin Park.
Yes.
And Linkin Park has lost its lead singer due to suicide at this point. But for a period of time, particularly when I was working with adolescents, we were listening to Linkin Park tunes in every group. And there was a sense of powerlessness and fear and sadness and anger that all commingled together in that music that really informed how I understood the way my clients felt as hospitalized people with within the mental health system. And I got a lot out of thinking about those things. I'd say Bone Thugs and Harmony also really changed the way that I thought about my own practice, my own clients, the struggles that they were dealing with. They helped me to explore some of the issues of racial oppression within care environments.
Yes.
Eloquent about talking about those things and about rapping about those things. And that has been really big. You'll notice I also have prints on the top of the bookshelf over here. So, you know, I grew into a music therapist in Minneapolis, and of course it's Prince's hometown, so there's certainly a local connection there. But Prince is an example of a human being that I would like to emulate, even outside of the music, which I love. You know, this is a person who regularly was involved in local school systems and giving money to struggling nonprofits that were dealing with the important social issues of the time. He was willing to be himself in ways that were not always understood or recognized, and he did it with flair and finesse. And so as a human being, I'm going to go with Prince. So you can see my music is sort of all over the place.
I love it. I also love that I'm getting to learn new things about you, which is really fun because I've known you for quite a while, and I'm thoroughly enjoying getting to know you in this way.
I'm glad.
Oh, we have mentioned self-care here and there throughout this time together. What are the ways that you care for yourself, Emma?
So typically speaking, live music and food are really important to my self-care. I like to cook. I like to gather with others and eat. I like to cook for people. I like all of that. And there's an energy that I get out of hearing music in a crowd. That's really important to my self-care. Now, those have been struggles in the past 6 months. And so what I've found is that my self-care routine has changed a lot. I'm still cooking, but I am only really targeting the people that live in my house. And some of those people don't like fancy food, and that's a quote.
I'm trying to guess which person said that.
I'm sure it's a good guess. My 8-year-old. So I've been sort of modifying that. I still do a lot of cooking. One of the things I've noticed during this pandemic season is that I require a lot more sleep, just at the basics.
Yes.
Than I did when I was out and about and getting energy from other people and doing that. There is something sort of exhausting about the isolation to me. And so that's been really important. I've also been singing up a storm in this, and singing in a way that I really like. I've always sung in my practice, but I have never sort of fancied myself a singer. So I've been experimenting with a lot of these apps that allow you to sort of have karaoke-esque or duet or those kinds of things. I'm just finding that opening my mouth and letting whatever comes out come out has been really important to my self-care recently. So I think those are two of my big ones for right now.
Thank you, Emma. So much wisdom. I love it. You are working a lot with music therapy students these days. What advice would you give to the music therapy students who are listening?
My advice would be to really enjoy your time in this space. You
Mm.
have so many opportunities to really look at yourself as a human being. You know, if you are a chemistry student, you don't get the same kind of opportunities to do introspective work
Mm-hmm.
about who you are as a human,
Yeah.
and to reach out and have community with other people, and to find people that you want to have as mentors and that could act as mentors for the long term. And to find not only the people you want to listen to, but also
Mm-hmm.
people you want to talk to.
Yeah.
And my advice is really just to enjoy that process and take it on as an adventure, uh, because you have an
Yeah.
opportunity that not every college or university student has.
Mm-hmm.
It's really sort of a wonderful thing, in my opinion.
It is. Mine too. Uh, and particularly in adventure these days. You mentioned finding the voices to listen to. What voices should they not listen to? What advice should those music therapy students ignore? Because there's a lot of advice out there.
Yeah. I would say I have two things to say about this. One is that there are times that you'll get advice that you know is wrong.
Mm,
You know it because your heart tells you so.
yep.
And I think it's really important to pay attention to that instinct.
Yeah.
Um, and particularly during this time
Mm,
when we've got a lot of music therapists who grew up in very white spaces and have always worked in very white spaces who might be feeling sort of defensive
mhm,
about that. Um, it's incredibly important to just be in touch with your own heart
mhm.
about what feels right and what doesn't. Aside from that, I also really think that anybody that tells you there's only one way to do this is wrong. And for some reason that happens on a fairly regular basis. So just be aware of that going in. Um, there are a million ways of doing this correctly, of
Mhm.
being a fantastic, relevant music therapist. Um, and anybody who thinks that you have to do it in one particular way, with one particular direction, with one particular set of modalities, it's just not telling the truth.
Yes. Thank you, Emma. You
Yeah.
shared with us a little bit about your diverse musical loves. If you had a theme song, what would it be?
Okay, so this one took me a long time.
I can't
So,
wait.
yeah. So one of the things in our family is that had we have adopted kids, and with each of our kids, as they have joined the family, we have found theme songs between them and us as parents.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I and our kids. So my first thought was, well, I've got a body of theme songs and they're all of those. And then I sat here and looked at it and went, yeah, but these are not necessarily about the totality of me. These
Yeah.
are about me as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came up with lots of things that were very politically and socially minded that feel like they get to the core of me, but that didn't feel like a holistic view either. The long and short of it is, I finally got to this song by the Indigo Girls, which
Mm-hmm.
is a lesbian, I'd say folk rock group that I've been a fan of since the beginning, really.
Mm-hmm.
They sing a tune that's called Let It Be Me. Are you familiar with this tune?
I haven't heard it in ages. Yes.
Yeah. So
Now
that
I'm
was
going to have to.
sort decided on, and really the theme of the song is I want to find ways to be a positive force in the people I come across in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the song is essentially about that and trying to reach toward that goal. And so it just felt like home when I settled on.
Oh, and know that it beautifully describes how I perceive you
Oh, thank
and the
you.
presence that you've been in my life. And part of why I'm so excited to get to share this time with you. What words of wisdom, Emma, from you or someone else would you like to leave us with today?
Listen. That's really my one word, is listen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you're in a place where you're a student, you've got lots and lots of opportunities to listen that are structured and presented to you. And when you're a professional, you may have to seek more opportunities with more intention
Mm-hmm.
to listen. But I think that's my word of wisdom for me and for others today.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I feel very honored to be the first guest.
I'm so excited to have you as the first guest. As we listen, one of my goals with this podcast and with the work that I do is to also use it as a platform to amplify other voices, to listen and learn, to share wisdom. And so whose voice in music therapy would you like to amplify today? Give a shout out to, suggest we listen to?
So many people.
And it can be a list.
It can be a list. Oh, good. So I think it's really vitally important right now to pay attention to the affinity groups, those that have been in play and have been oftentimes put down and further marginalized by our music therapy community, and those that are just sort of emerging, and there are several of those. I would really like to amplify that set of voices at this point. And I want to say that I think that those voices should have been amplified long, long ago. But we still have the opportunity to amplify them now. And so I think that's where I'm going to go with that. I would also like to amplify the voice specifically of Adenike Webb.
Yes.
Dr. Adenike
Webb.
Yes. Who has been a great force in my thinking about how to teach, how to sort of decolonize our teaching practices and the musics that we teach. Her writings have been really important to me. I've loved hearing her on the Black Creative Healing podcast. Yes. So I would shout out to her as well.
Thank you, Emma. And we'll make sure to link the Black Creative Healing podcast too when we do our links of resources, because it is phenomenal. Adenike and Natasha Thomas host that together. And it is one of those places where I always learn and feel honored to get to listen and to grow and to expand my way of knowing and thinking. Anything else you'd like to share with us, Emma, that you have not had the opportunity to?
I can't think of anything other than thank you.
Thank you to Emma. We really appreciate you joining us today. And thank you to all of our listeners as well. If you haven't already done so, please make sure to subscribe to this MT Mentor podcast today so that you don't miss an episode. And if you want to dive deeper into some of these practices, you can also learn about and join our private membership group at joyfulnoisesllc.com/mt-mentor. All music therapy students and professionals are welcome, and equity-based pricing is available. Subscribe to this free MT Mentor podcast and join our membership group today, MT Mentor. Let's fill our cups and share our wisdom together.